Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up with Nancy, I kind of figured as much like the way last episode ended. Like, okay, so it's meant to be a place where you live in this perfect world, or just like kind of like your happy place, and then you end up kind of dying from it. Obviously, like her dad's not in jail, her mom's alive, and then she goes like, oh, like she's meant to help someone who's bought a new house or something that's going on, a mystery needs to be solved. Who does she meet? She meets Nick, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So I'm like, I was like, oh, so how's this all going to work out? And she's talking to Nick, who runs up and hugs her, George. I was like, oh, your besties in this universe. The Ace is, as Nancy says later on, pretty much the same, and you have Bess kind of being like a, as she says, like an influencer, which is interesting because I guess it almost fits kind of where she was, but she's very like low key, and I guess it's kind of like almost like the opposite. I mean, I guess it's like it kind of like combines like the Marvin aspect of her with just kind of like living it up type. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Well, I think it's probably a combination of two, because like obviously like she lived that fake life, like, oh, she came from a very well off family, which technically she does because she's a Marvin, but you get what I'm saying. So that was interesting. But obviously it's like, oh, at first like everything just like she's still seeping in. I didn't expect it to be like her kind of snapping out of it like at the beginning of the episode like that. That kind of took me for a surprise that's like she ended up snapping out of being like, wait, because she was like, it's like, oh, there was a fire or something. It's like, oh yeah, get rid of the smoke, but she was like, there's no smoke there. Like for her, it's like the false reality it was creating was, and Nancy is very particular about details. She's like, wait, what? So it's like certain things didn't line up, and then because of that, like the fictitious world it created started breaking in front of her. So she's like, yeah, you guys aren't the way you are. The fact of the matter is, it's like you and me are best friends, and it's like, yeah, we have been since like ninth grade, and you're fine with living in a van, and you're pretty much the same. So I thought that was interesting. And she also listed off these different things about Nick, and Nick was like, whoa, how do you know all this stuff? So now it's a thing of like, okay, she's got to get to, the medical hospital that she's in real life here. But it turns out that place, that address leads to the place that Nick bought. And I was like, huh. Because she was like, oh, certain things look familiar. I was like, huh. I was like, because I was thinking at first, I was like, oh, is it supposed to be the layout of her house in some shape or form? But it turns out no. So obviously Nick's asking questions about like, oh, so what about this other world, us? It's like, oh yeah, there was kind of something more, but obviously Nancy kind of dodges the question. But hey, here's the door to the whisper box room that she's kind of stuck in, but it's locked. And then there's that creepy thing of like the blanket ghost coming towards her, and her and Nick turn at the same time to see it drop, and I'm like, whoa. Because I even love that too, because like basically, because what ends up happening next is like, all right, who sold you this house? It's like, oh, it was Ryan Hudson. So it's like they go to and even Nick being like, oh yeah, Ryan, he's such a great guy. I was like, okay, this is supposed to be the perfect world and everything. And it turns out, hey, Ryan's actually a good guy in this world. And him and Nancy is like, oh, Nancy, this and that. And it's like, oh, because she actually helped him in the past and stuff like that. So they actually have a good relationship. But the fact is, it turns out Tiffany's actually alive in this universe too. So like Horseshoe Bay hasn't become the murder supernatural, well, I say murder capital, like, but the supernatural capital that it's become, and obviously all that death and destruction. And that's what actually is kind of heartbreaking for Nancy, because it's like in this world, like literally everyone is great. And that was kind of what bummed her about thinking about going back to the real world, because obviously the real world is where she's needed. This fantasy world is great and everything, but that's all it is. It's a dream. It's not real. But it's sad to think like when she looks at everyone around her, because it's like she's saying this later on, because and I like this was kind of a beautiful moment. Like obviously they're going through all this, like because Nancy had hidden the key to the door. But the fact of the matter is, it was kind of like need to kind of be on basically a scavenger hunt, and so it turns into a thing of like Nick is going to help her. Like I'm gonna be skipping around, but like everyone else showed up, and it's like no matter what reality is, the squad's got Nancy's back, so that's pretty dope, I love because the entire time Ace is like, yeah, whenever we kind of figure this whole thing out, you got to give me like whatever it is that you're on, so I can get some as well, But it's a thing of like she feels like everyone's lives, even Horseshoe Bay in general, isn't this good. Like there's so much wrong with Horseshoe Bay out there that it's kind of like you obviously want to stay, especially because she had that moment with her mom. The moment her mom was like, "Yeah, my doctor said something," I was like, "It's going to be revealed that she's not sick," because I guess it's supposed to be a reflection of when Nancy found out her mom was sick. So this is the opposite of it. It's like, "Oh, I'm good," and for Nancy, it's like for her, she it's the opposite of what she wants, so it's just, I mean, not the opposite of what she wants, but it's what she wanted, and she kind of gets it in its reality. So, but yeah, them working together, they end up finding like the tree where the key is, but then they go get the key, but then like the creature pulls it. Like once again, this is something that kind of pops up all throughout its affected matter. She starts seeing that symbol popping up everywhere. She's like, where do I recognize it from? Because even at first I was like, where does she recognize it from? It didn't click in my head till like at the end of the episode when they revealed it. It's like, oh, it's from the card, the key card she had gotten. So that was interesting. And then at the same time, all this is happening on the outside. Obviously, Nick and George are trying to get back in to get to Nancy, but they can't. So they talk to Sal, who's like, yeah, he's been in and out of this place for so long. So he's like, all right, so the reason why they were able to stop the haunting before is because it was sealed away by a priest. So you have Ace and Bess going look for the priest, but that was super sinister because all of a sudden he pops out of nowhere in the back seat. He's like, what's up with that? And he's like, oh, here's the holy water, make sure it lasts. And then like they turn around and he's gone. I'm like, wait, what? Because it seemed weird, because it seemed like Ace out of anyone seemed more on edge in that place. Part of me wonders, is it because of his crossover into that supernatural realm, like because of that tie-in like that? Maybe he felt something. It just, because part of me almost wondered, did he recognize the priest or something? Like I almost had to expect him to be like, yeah, that dude was my grandfather or something. I legitimately kept thinking like, oh, he was related to the priest or something, like that he knew the guy, because like the look on his face, it seems, because like the moment they got there, he was just, but maybe he was just kind of sussing the place out, like this is kind of weird and uncomfortable. It's just his demeanor in that moment, that scene just seemed interesting. That's why I kind of expecting more from it, but I guess not. But luckily they go back inside. Turns out the holy water super works. It was interesting when Saul put it on and like he reached for the doorknob, the rod started going away. So they try to pick Nancy up, but pulling, like, while her mind is kind of trapped like it is, it was killing her body, them trying to take her out of there. So now, obviously, Nick is flipping out because obviously he cares about Nancy, so he's trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? We have to save Nancy. And it's like, okay, so him and George and Sal kind of go try to find a means to kind of help her while, Ace and Bess stay behind. Because Ace is like, we need to talk to her because, you guys talked to me when I was in my coma, but I heard all of you. So it's like, we got to do the same thing so that Nancy comes back to us. And I thought it was kind of interesting because every time they talk to Nancy, letters drop. And I thought that was so interesting. I was like, oh. And we kind of end up finding out the significance of that. I'll get to that in a second. But it was interesting, Nancy and, Nick. It's actually sad because for her, it's like, because she ends up talking about it later on, she kind of feels bad that she didn't fight for them. Because what went wrong with their relationship is because Nancy kind of wanted to do so much on her own. She didn't really want to, she didn't communicate with everyone. And granted, they kind of have their rough patches, like not just her and Nick, but everyone. But it's just like, because Nancy has a hard time leaning on people. She kind of wants to do everything because I think she's going so long with handling things on her own. Plus, it's just kind of how she's going through so much of her life, especially like dealing with her mom's passing. Like she kind of handled that on her own. And obviously, it made her kind of resent her dad a little bit because it's like, oh, you just kind of spent so much time working. You weren't really there at that time. So so for Nancy, she's kind of built up this wall around herself, kind of all of her life. But now, over the course of the season, we've kind of realized like what the events that kind of led to her building that wall up, around herself. It was, a defense mechanism to protect herself. And so, her and Nick, and he's like, oh, like, did you tell me like how much of a big mistake it was for me kind of letting you go? And she's like, I wish I did. And obviously that's got to suck, the fact of the matter is, it's like, yeah, you're happy in this memory, but at the very least, it still reflects the fact is that Nick always has her back, because it's like, she's like, yeah, you think I'm crazy, you don't believe me. He's like, the fact is you believe it, and that's enough for me to believe it. And it's like, despite everything, Nick always has her back. Like I said, along with everyone else, so. And Nancy ends up saying it, though. She's like, I wish I had fought for us. And goes to unlock the door, and I was like, out. And the twist of, oh, it didn't work. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I was like, so what's going to be the actual way of getting out of here? She gathers up all the letters. She's trying to figure out if there's some other clue. Her mom's there talking to her. And it reminds Nancy that why these letters are in the letters being in blue envelopes is a sign in itself, because that's the letter her mom had left her about the whole roadmap to heaven and stuff like that. So she ends up finding a letter and, reading it, and it's like, lo and behold, where's the passageway out? It's her closet, which is interesting because obviously, like, when Lucy came back to start haunting her again, like, what was it? Like, remember, like when she was talking to her dad after he got arrested, sometime after he was in jail, because she couldn't talk. She didn't want to talk to him at first because she felt so bad about her being the reason why he got arrested. But Lucy was in her closet and then kind of went into her closet and the door closed. So it's like very representative. I guess it's almost supposed to represent the fact that her closet is kind of this supernatural doorway. Maybe she's not recognizing it yet. But obviously, because I was so curious about this situation, because it's hard to, because at first I was wondering if her mom, if Kate was the arm that kept reaching out to Nancy, like, because it almost seemed like Kate was trying to keep her there, but at the same time it's like, she's like, I can't stay here, and it's like, because you taught me, and she's like, right, to always seek out the truth, and then she's like, if it wasn't for you, Mom, because of you, Mom, I am the person that I am, and I think that's why Nancy is so dedicated to truth, because that's a quality she got from her mom. And so it makes you wonder in that moment, you're like, is that just a manifestation of kind of what she wanted, or is that legitimately her mom kind of, being like, oh, you can stay here? So that's why I'm kind of like, maybe it's supposed to represent both. Like, it is like hey, this is a version of me to make you stay here, but also another version being like, yeah, because despite this being a fantasy world, everyone is still true to who they are. That, in this case, like, she wants Nancy to go out and find the truth, even if it means having to leave her behind. But it's because for Nancy, this gave her an opportunity to say goodbye, like she never had that chance before. So she goes into the closet and wakes up, and luckily they're able to get out of there in time. They did bring up an interesting conversation later on, because it's like, well, the facility, there was gas leaks and stuff like that, so the facility isn't going to be used again, which makes me wonder, are we going to run into people like Saul again? It might just be a thing of there's different facilities, like all the patients get shipped to and stuff like that, but part of me wonders, are there going to be more to that? Probably not. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh, like the Whisper box is destroyed, right? So, can hauntings be destroyed by a building being destroyed? Because obviously the hauntings are tied to specific places. I mean, those are exceptions, but that specific haunting was tied to that place. It was kind of engrossed in that place. So that place being destroyed, it's like, maybe it destroyed that haunting, or maybe it just made it so that haunting spreads to the rest of the Horseshoe Bay. We'll ultimately have to wait and see in that case. But when it comes to obviously Lucy's kind of a little more freeform. She's kind of all over the place. So there's that whole situation. But obviously Nancy's kind of listing off to everybody like all the differences between who they were in the other world, and telling Ace, hey, I just love that whole thing of Ace still just being exactly the same. But then it's like, oh, what about you and me, Nancy? And she tells Nick, like, oh, we solved, a case together. It's like, oh, there is? And he was like, no. She's like, there was more. But then George calls him. And in that moment, she can see him and George together, like, because she had already said that to Nick. There was a part of her that probably kind of felt like she had already lost Nick. Maybe there was a part of her still holding out hope. Because like I said, last episode, if you look at it, she could hear, like, Nick and George talking. The look in her eye kind of like accepting, like, oh, she saw the beginnings of something happening there. So seeing them together, and even Ace catches on, because she's like, well, kind of got to deal with the whole, ex situation, But the fact of the matter is kind of getting used to that situation, because, it's like, because she already knows, like, in that universe, everyone was happy for different reasons. It's like a lot of sadness is, allocated around all of this in the real world. And it's like, if Nick and George can find happiness together, then she's happy for them. At least it's working out for somebody. But obviously, there's some good that came through all this, because, hey, her dad's home. Granted, he's on house arrest, but still. But then you start realizing, like, her dream, well, that fake reality was actually giving her more clues than she realized, because it turns out, like, her dad, wanting to work back at the, she's like, oh, why don't you start, you need some hobbies and stuff like that, because, I mean, if you do some extra stuff, because if you stay inside all day worrying about the case, he's like, I'm gonna go crazy. So it's like, okay. So she suggests him going to, like, historical society and kind of working there again, because obviously that's where he worked at in her fake reality. But it turns out the symbol for that is the symbol she's been seeing all over the place, including on the card. So she goes there. She meets the lady who runs the place who has burns on her arm. So it's like, okay. So like I said, everything. So mainly it was meant to keep her captured. But the fact of the matter, I think it's because of the way Nancy's mind works, because she's so like always looking for details. Her subconscious was trying to tell her something. Like her subconscious was breaking stuff through. Because obviously, like I said, that fake reality was already crumbling before her eyes. She already knew it wasn't real. But the fact of the matter is, like I said, her subconscious was telling her like, this is what's really going on. Here's some clues to this stuff. So. And it's like, this is a key. Where does it go to? Does it go to Lucy's mom's box? It's like, no, it goes to Tiffany. I'm like, oh, what's this about? Tiffany had dropped it off like a couple days before she died. And it turns out it's a recording where she's like, oh, she's after me. And part of me's like, who's this? I'm after, who's after her? So on and so forth. And it's like, it's because of what I found out. And it turns out the person haunting her is Lucy. And I'm like, oh, Lucy haunted her. It's because she felt, and in that moment it clicked in my head, because that was something that came up earlier in the season. Because remember, Nancy was like, if we find out like Tiffany and Lucy's cases are connected, so basically solving one will solve the other. And it seems we're coming back to that angle, because now it seems like Tiffany died because she found out something about Lucy, and whoever killed Lucy killed Tiffany to keep her mouth shut about that whole thing. So now it is bringing it back full front. If we can solve Tiffany's murder, we're solving Lucy's murder, or vice versa. You solve Lucy's murder, you solve Tiffany's murder. So that was really interesting details that kind of get dropped. But it is an interesting thing about that lady, because like Nancy's like, who are you? Because those are boxes for everyone in town. She's like, I'm kind of a secret keeper. I'm like, what the hell is that about? That seems like something they're like throwing in right now, but that definitely seems like a major plot element of like that's going to grow and become something. But that's really interesting, considering the fact is they've all had their experience. Like obviously Nancy's being haunted by Lucy, and it turns out, well, so was Tiffany. So Tiffany was more so specific because Tiffany found out something, but maybe Lucy's picking Nancy because, well, maybe it has something to do with Kate, which I've been literally saying that since the beginning. It still hasn't come up, and nothing came up during that moment between her and her mom, so maybe there won't ever be. But the fact of the matter is, maybe it's just because Nancy is the sleuth that she is, that's why that happened. But it is interesting that it's like a couple, I mean, who knows how long the haunting was going on, but before Nancy got haunted by Lucy, Tiffany was. So I guess Tiffany getting murdered, Lucy decided to kind of latch on, because I guess like they were kind of the last two people to interact, so maybe like the haunting kind of passed to Nancy in that regard. And the reason why I also think it's interesting, because it's like, well, Nancy's getting haunted by Lucy, and obviously George got possessed by Tiffany, so there's something to that, in the grand scheme of things. So a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode. I'm curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.